brands with purpose actually grow twice as fast than the average of our brands. So the moment you define a real good purpose that fits the category that you're in, that is product linked, that is taking advantage and is really built on the heritage that you've built, we really see that there's a huge correlation with growth. I think we've passed the stage of explaining why diversity is so important. But what is still important is to make sure that leaders lead for inclusion. And I think these diverse backgrounds, diverse experiences, this is really creating, I think, a company that acknowledges the beauty of diversity, but also then on the basis of that grows faster. We're learning along the way. By far, we haven't tackled all of it. It is still a journey out there, but these are just a couple of examples where I truly believe that brands are standing for something that matters.
Welcome to the Marketing and Strategy Club at London Business School. We're so excited to have Miss Conny Braams today with us. She joined Unilever as a marketing trainee back in 1990 and has spent her career growing through various roles at Unilever. She's currently the Chief Digital and Marketing Officer and is leading the digital transformation of Unilever into a future-fit, fully digitized organization. We also have Jon Ratcliffe with us today. Jon has been involved with the Marketing and Strategy Club lecture series since 2009. He's held senior roles in Google and YouTube in multiple markets and is currently a council member at the World Economic Forum. He's a founder of the Engage Video Group, technology-driven social media and video business. Thank you, Jon, for coming to speak with us today and hosting this event for us. Thank you, Conny. I'd leave it to you, Jon.
Thank you so much. You did such a great job of introducing us there. And Conny, thank you so much for taking the time. Have such a remarkable career and so much we can all learn from. I've personally been a long-time fan of Unilever. I remember 20 odd years ago when I was still at university, when the Unilever team came to present to us, it was defined as the University of Marketing. And I think today that sort of reputation still exists. And having spent 30 years there, it sort of struck me that you must have a PhD in marketing from the University of Marketing. And just such a remarkable career in multiple different markets around the world, working in multiple different teams on multiple different brands. And I thought, just such a remarkable experience for us all to learn from. I thought a great place for us to start, Conny, if you don't mind, is just talking about your career journey and where you've come from and what brought you to be the Chief Digital and Marketing Officer.
Ashita, thanks for the really kind introduction. And Jon, it's great to be here. I see some familiar faces on the call as well. So really looking forward to this chat. Well, your question on my career and where did I come from or where did I end up is quite a broad one, obviously, Jon. So let me just call out a couple of highlights. By now, you must have figured out that I'm Dutch because I've never managed to get my accent in a better form. So having lived and worked across the world, this is what it ended up being. Anyway, I hope you all understand me. So normally that's not so much a problem. I've lived and worked across many countries. So I have lived and worked in Spain. I've lived and worked in Singapore, being responsible for Asia, Africa, and the Middle East. And now I'm officially based in London, but that has been a bit hard to get to due to COVID, as many of you will have suffered too. But still trying to manage to get there in the coming weeks. Been there for the last month, so that has actually been really good. Because my team is based in London and I've had the privilege to go back to the office a couple of times already. So a bit more physical presence always helps. But anyway, your question was about how did you end up here? And well, something to say about my career. First of all, it for sure hasn't been linear. So people often think, oh, and then you've done this job and then from an assistant brand manager, you became brand manager and here all the way up. But actually, my career has been more of a combination of a broad range of experiences. So as I said, I did local jobs, international jobs. I've been in marketing, been in sales. I've done communications for a bit of time, general management roles across Asia, Africa, and the Middle East. And before this role, I was actually the Executive Vice President for Middle Europe. So a true P&L job and a general manager in the Benelux. And actually, if I look back, it was never planned in this way, but all those experiences of having worked in D&E countries, of having done general management roles, but also specialist roles, and of course, spent a long time in marketing, led me, I think, to this newly created role as Unilever's first Chief Digital and Marketing Officer. So actually, I think a nice combination of things that I've done, that I was given the privilege to lead, and also a bit of curiosity always helps along the way to explore new territories. But most of my career, Jon, has obviously been in marketing, and recently, of course, the digital side of marketing, but actually also the back office digitalization. So the totality of digitizing end to end.
Sounds amazing, Conny, and super excited to dive deeper into exactly what you look to focus on in that role. So such a fascinating journey. And I guess one of the questions which is always interesting to us as an audience and as a group of students is just to understand, and it's obviously a hard question to answer, but having 30 years within one organization and building such an established career in that organization, just wondering what sort of personal attributes and personal superpowers you feel have allowed you to have success in this role.
Well, after 30 years and reflecting a bit of not only the roles and the experiences, but of course, what is in my personality and what have I tried to develop over those years. There's probably a couple of characteristics. Firstly, I tend to have a bit of a track record of positive change. So I like change, but then also, of course, always leading to something that is better than it was before. And I love to lead teams through those difficult times, at times uncertain times, but actually seeing why we're doing it. And that's why, Jon, I've always loved the expression of a ship is safe in the harbor or on the shore, but that's not really what it's built for. So a bit of adventure, a bit of diving into new things. And that's why part of my purpose, I've also said, actually, I energize to explore, not only for myself, but also for the people around me. And I think this curiosity, this sense of diving into new things, the true adventure, never alone, but always with a group of people, is probably what made me navigate the storm really well. And these are important characteristics. So I think the other thing to call out next to curiosity and positive change is probably engagement in an organization like Unilever is, and probably some of you will know it a bit better than others. It's a matrix organization, so making sure that you engage people, have a rationally convincing and emotionally appealing vision of the future, and then getting people to engage on the journey, I think is one of the other things that I've always truly loved to do.
That sounds amazing. As I reflect on the industry we find ourselves in, and just thinking about marketing and advertising and data and tech and all of these different things which come together, it must be the fastest moving industry which exists in a big organization like Unilever. And I'm sure that sort of gravitas towards positive change must be a really big part of succeeding in that space with such change. I guess an interesting question would just be to reflect on some of those changes which you've seen over your time there, and just sort of the ones which spring to mind, which have been interesting to watch happen in front of you.
Well, there's many to mention, and I think if I cut a long story short, I think the consumer goods sector has come full circle. So whatever happened in the past, when the shoemaker around the corner actually was making your shoes for your grandparents, it was all of it was direct to consumer. The shoemaker knew their consumers really well. They had long established relationships. They were thinking about consumer life cycles, and they started with the kids' shoes, and then they came to college shoes, and then on to work shoes, etc. And then actually we scaled everything. So scaling brought lower cost, higher quality, mass media, basically. And that was the era when also brands came into existence as avatars for a specific value and values. And nowadays, due to digital and technology, we've come full circle, because now we really want to personalize again in fast-moving consumer goods, whether it is co-creating on innovation, and there's many examples out there, or whether it is serving you messages that are specifically for you. So in the end, it has come full circle, and that within it has created lots of new opportunities for growth, obviously. So, and these new opportunities for growth are sometimes driven by digitally native brands that are being born at this moment in time on the edges of basically what core brands stand for, but it's also core brands getting into the edges of the new demand spaces, which is also possible now because you can target much better, selecting audiences, making sure that you target your messaging, having personalized messaging, and then also being able to convert that into commerce. And I think we're living in a fascinating time, because also in this whole area of marketing, commerce, entertainment, you see a true convergence happening from media channels becoming commerce channels, especially the social media channels, but also you see commerce channels becoming media channels, where search is really important on Amazon, but also in the whole advertising industry that actually has boomed also within the digital commerce channel. So it's fascinating that we've come full circle, basically, and trying to personalize as much as we can. At the same time, still taking advantage of scale in many ways, obviously, with quality, with lower cost, but also with branding. And then, of course, the whole revolution of digital technology, digitization, has brought so many new opportunities. And also in the marketing arena, a lot of these capabilities that are now really fundamental in performance marketing, precision marketing, data-driven marketing, or whatever we call it. These are elements of our profession that actually didn't so much exist 10 years ago. So it is indeed a very dynamic space. And actually that also brings my two hats together of Chief Digital and Chief Marketing. It isn't a Chief Digital Marketing Officer that I'm trying to be. I really try to do the two areas, but there is a huge, I try to really lead the areas for separate change. Both anchored on consumer centricity, but in the end, bringing it together in a couple of the areas I just mentioned. So all in all, fascinating dynamic times. I hope I didn't throw in too much jargon, Jon, correct me if I did so.
No, that was so interesting. And just listening to how much change must be happening within the organization and having to breed a culture where everyone is comfortable with change and embracing change, it must be really interesting. I think one of the things which Unilever has always been well renowned for is culture. And having been within the organization for 30 years, I'd be fascinated to understand sort of what you've seen of the culture of Unilever, which you feel has worked really well and allowed the business to succeed over such a long period of time.
Yeah, so really fascinating question, Jon, because culture is always a bit harder to describe, obviously. It's a group of individuals that portray certain behavior. And by what is that behavior guided? And I think in Unilever, one of the things and one of the reasons why I stayed for 30 years plus is because apparently I really love the culture that we work in. And it at its heart, it truly has purpose. So right from the founding days, whether it was Vandenberg and Jurgens or the Lever brothers, these were people that not only wanted to put a product on the market, but were taking really good care of the people and had a further dream with it, wanted to accomplish something in society that without these products wasn't possible to achieve. So, and that has always been with Unilever. So this beacon for purpose-led growth, I think, is important. And nowadays we call it, okay, we believe that companies with purpose thrive, we grow. We believe that people with purpose thrive. We believe that brands with purpose grow. So this purpose thinking, and I'm sure we'll get back to it, is certainly one of the elements. Then I think the second thing that always fascinated me is that Unilever, as you said, we were the marketing academy in the world, but we always want to be leading edge, whatever we do. So let's make sure that professionalism prevails. And I think one of the other really important things for me, at least, is that we want to be a beacon for equity, diversity, and inclusion. So we want people to be their authentic self. We want to really benefit from diverse perspectives. And I think we've passed the stage of explaining why diversity is so important. But what is still important is to make sure that leaders lead for inclusion. And I think these diverse backgrounds, diverse experiences, this is really creating, I think, a company that acknowledges the beauty of diversity but also then on the basis of that grows faster. So actually, it's a nice combination, I would say, of purpose, professionalism, leading edge, and diversity. These, for me, would be the ones that stand out. And next to that, we remain to be a business. So accountability and performance management comes into play as well, obviously.
That's so interesting. And I have to say, just as a spectator from the outside, it's great to see that the communications and the advertising are really starting to embody these positionings from a purpose point of view. And it's just fascinating to see from the outside, and excited to dive deeper into that. One of the other points you touched on in your last question here was just around how culture is made up of the people around you. And I thought, a really big part of a company over a long period of time is leaders around you and people around you who inspire you. And I was wondering if anyone springs to mind under the heading of inspiring great people you've worked with.
Well, there's always, and luckily there's loads of them. And as a true marketeer, the first thing I need to say is obviously that the consumer really inspires me on a daily basis, because that's what drives whatever we do on a daily basis, isn't it? Always wanting to deepen your understanding of how consumers and people live, shop, consume, and what are the real pain points and how can we solve them. But a bit more directly to your question, John, what are the people that have really inspired you? And I can mention tremendous amount of people, because mostly you work with your teams day in, day out. And whether it was my Chinese colleagues who have surprised me all the time, or whether it was my Asian colleagues or my Dutch ones, it is a completely different culture. But to mention a specific individual, I think there's probably two. For the ones who are better known, I think what Paul Polman did for Unilever was really tremendous, because what he did is he actually made whatever was in our hearts and minds and in the culture already for so long, he made it explicit. So the implicitness became explicit in calling out the Unilever Sustainable Living Plan with really ambitious targets for planet and society, and not knowing really how to get there, but knowing that in businesses and in many organizations, whenever you set yourself targets, creativity bubbles up, new solutions will be found. So I really, really admire him for being so courageous, which now seems to be logical, sometimes even called hygiene. 10 years ago, or at this, well, now 12 years ago, was really adventurous, was really courageous, was bold. And he really believed that if a business didn't have a purpose, it had no reason to be. And then I also want to call out my current boss, Alan Job. I think what is fascinating about him is he is building on the legacy that Paul left, but he also truly believes in equity, diversity, and inclusion, making sure the team feels psychologically safe to mention anything that's on their heart to make the business better. And I think he's just a great leader that fits the current dimension that leaders need. A great heart for people, for the planet, to wanting to do the right thing, and actually making sure that our business is truly multi-stakeholder led. So of course he's busy seeing investors and analysts and making sure our shareholders are satisfied with our performance, but at the same time he spends as much time with our own people, with our supply chain partners, with consumers, with our customers, with making sure that actually NGOs, everybody is involved in doing what is right for the business. So I truly see him as an inspiration for me too.
That's absolutely fascinating, Conny, and thanks so much for sharing. Super excited to dive into a little bit more about what that sustainable living plan is. And I think from the outside, we see pieces of communication and that sort of thing would be great. Maybe now, if okay, just to touch on what the sort of the basic thinking around the sustainable living plan is.
Yeah, the sustainable living plan was sort of 12 years ago launched. And at this moment in time, it's being replaced by our Unilever Compass, because what was really good at the time is to call out that we wanted to grow our business with halving our environmental imprint and solving being a good force for societal issues. And I think what was really good about it at that time is that we set ourselves targets, real harsh targets like you do in the business, and then see how you can achieve that. And by launching the USLP, but also living through it, we've actually established a business case for sustainability. Because what it did for us, it first of all lowered our costs. So we've taken 1.2 billion out of our supply chain cost by just lowering our waste in our factories, by making sure that we source differently, sustainable ingredients, etc. So lower cost was an important part. Then the second important part, and also for this call, is we recruited better talent. It was a true talent magnet. People are wanting to join Unilever because we want to be more than a business. We want to make sure that we do the right thing for society. And that has now landed in, I think, something 50 plus markets out of the 75 in which we measure it for us to be the employer of choice. So really important. The third reason that what it showed is that brands with purpose actually grow twice as fast than the average of our brands. So the moment you define a real good purpose that fits the category that you're in, that is product linked, that is taking advantage and is really built on the heritage that you've built, we really see that there's a huge correlation with growth. So basically what it does, it has a correlation factor of 0.76 with brand power. And brand power in itself, so if your brand gains brand power, you normally increase your market share, and with that you grow faster. So that was an important one. And the last one I want to call out, what the USLP has brought us, is less risk. Because any weather effects that we currently see happening all around us, which first touched the more vulnerable areas, is now coming across every person's daily life, actually has a devastating effect on raw materials and the sourcing of it and the logistics, etc. So if we can get ourselves together and make this planet a better world, then actually that does involve less risks for businesses as well. So the beauty of the Unilever Sustainable Living Plan is that it has confirmed what we believed in, that there is a true business case for sustainability. Now, and why did we then move on to now what is called the Unilever Compass? Is because we wanted to integrate it even more into our business strategy. And that's how we came to the three beliefs that I just called out, which is our beliefs. There's many other beliefs out there, but our beliefs is that brands with purpose grow, and they will grow sustainably, that people with purpose thrive. If you know your purpose, and if you find jobs within your career where you can live your purpose on a daily basis, you get the best out of a person, but you also do the best for the company. And that is why in the end, companies with purpose last, because Unilever is a company that's not out there to make quick money and then dissolve or be sold or buy other companies only for the purpose of getting bigger. It is there to really be there for basically the next generation and the next generation, because we truly believe it's an add-on to the world, and then we can do so much more from our business perspective, because we know for certain that it will take many, many partnerships with governments, with NGOs, with the crowds to really solve the big issues that the world is facing at this moment in time.
That's so exciting, Conny, and I think such a good thing for humanity when the biggest companies in the world lean into making a difference in this space. Because I guess if it's not the big companies, then who are we relying on to do it? And just so exciting to hear that Unilever has taken such a strong step in that direction. One of the other things you touched on earlier, and I just love to circle back to, is just people. And I think as you look at Unilever as a very big employer in the world, and an employer of really great people who have come in contact with, I guess one of the big questions is just how do you find the best people, and then how do you keep the best people over the long term? And I think one of the fascinating things about Unilever is having a look at the company. So many people stay there for a long time, and it just would be super interesting to understand your view on talent finding and keeping.
Yeah, indeed, I think, but that any organization is actually made up of the people. So I always get a bit frustrated if people say, oh, Unilever doesn't want that. There is no Unilever. Unilever is us, and we make up Unilever. And what I think is really important in the people we recruit is indeed that they have a sense of what their purpose is. I don't expect people in their 20s to know exactly what their purpose in life is, but a sense of wanting to accomplish more, that they're eager to learn. So curiosity is for us always enormously important. It is a willingness to learn, unlearn, and relearn, and really upskill. Lifelong learning, we call it. But I know that for some groups that doesn't sound so interesting, but I think for many of people on this call, it will be. So actually what you look for is a strong set of purpose, a desire to learn, a diverse set of experiences. And indeed, Jon, as you said, we used to be a company that was recruiting from the start. And I'm probably one of the ones that is an example of that, 30 years plus, starting as a trainee. But actually, we've also realized that diversity also means that you bring in people who have had experiences across many other businesses as well. And I see that specifically also in the digital talents that we've attracted. So there is capability areas that is just so much better if you really want to speed it up, to buy it in and to really get people with different perspectives in and different experience sets. So I think that is really important. And what is fascinating about the way we recruit is that has undergone so many changes as well. And now a big part of our recruitment is actually done digitally. So you need to play a couple of games before you get into the first face-to-face interaction with somebody of Unilever. And that has taken out many biases because whatever we do, we all know, and I'm sure that everybody on this call knows, we can pretend we don't have a human bias, but everybody has one. So if you don't watch out, you start recruiting people that are similar to you. And that's probably the worst thing we ought to do. So, and that's why I think it is marvelous to now have digital tools helping us to prevent us from recruiting the same people. So actually, we're on this journey of making sure that, well, there's of course the most diverse set of people working with us, as long as they are curious and have a strong sense of purpose. I think that would be the two things I would call out as common features.
That makes a lot of sense, Conny. Conny, I was wondering if we could talk a little bit about the role which you fill, so the Chief Digital and Marketing Officer. I think it's one of those roles which has changed shape so much over the last 10 years, and I think looks so different today to what a CMO role might have looked 10 years ago. And I think it must be also very challenging to try and understand all of the various components which make up marketing today. You know, even if I just look at digital, where I've spent most of my career, there's so much changing within that space. And I'd just be fascinated to hear your view on your sort of objective of your role and how you sort of hope to stay up to date with all of these shifts and changes, especially with the digital component being such a big part of your role specifically.
I think one of the components that we haven't really talked about is what I always try to do is make the complex simple again, because otherwise I myself get lost. So what is it now really that I'm trying to do? And in the end, it boils down to what I try to do is really make sure that Unilever grows and that we have consistent, profitable, responsible, and competitive growth happening for Unilever. And I see digital and marketing as two huge enablers to be driving that growth. And the beauty, as I said, is that they have a lot in common because they both are consumer-centric. They both are huge change agendas, and they both driven quite a bit by data and technology, as you call out. But it all starts, if you make things simple again, with really understanding the consumer centricity. That's also how digitally native businesses start. They see a pain point, they find a solution to it, and they really try to bring the people who are interested in that problem into contact with their solution. So, and that is what we've now tried to capture in our new marketing philosophy for Unilever. We had a marketing philosophy for quite a number of years. It was called Crafting Brands for Life, but we felt, due to all the dynamic changes that you also mentioned, Jon, that it was time to rethink what marketing really does. And we've launched our new marketing philosophy. It's called Get on the Front Line. And it expresses actually a lot of what we've been talking about. So get on the front line of innovation, of consumers' life, on sustainability, get on the front line of pop culture, what is hot at this moment in time. And it is built on 3 pillars. So the first pillar is Get Real, which is really getting to understand our consumers, their pain points, use data and analytics, but of course also physical interactions with consumers. So that is the Get Real pillar. Then you have the Do Good pillar. And the Do Good for us is really important, obviously, because we think our brands need to stand for something more than the product that they offer. that very much taps into conscious consumption that is taking place. We haven't really touched so much on consumer trends, but what we really see across the globe is that people are way more conscious and cautious in what they buy, how they live, how they can have a better imprint. So the do good pillar for us is not only about the brand say, so the advertising that we do, but you also need to do things. So what are the activities you employ? And then the third pillar is be unmissable, which has also become way more important with all the digitalization, the many channels people can take a look at, the many impressions you get. So how are you unmissable? Unmissable in terms of first to mind, and then secondly, first to find. Because of course, digital commerce plays a way more important role for us, and there being unmissable and easy to find is really critical. So, and in all of that, actually digitalization plays an important role. I tried to allude in some of the sentences I said to that a bit. So it's not something that is separate, it's actually fully integrated in our new philosophy. And the main reason why we did this, launching a new marketing philosophy, is of course to express that marketeers need different tools, new capabilities, etc., but also helping them to cut through the clutter and say, well, what is marketing now really about? It is about getting real, doing good, and being unmissable. And if that is the umbrella in which you walk, with which you start a day, I wanted to say walk into the office, but with an international community around, that might not be possible for all of us. I think in which you start your day as a marketeer, then you're doing well. And basically, I hope that helps also the audience to make some sense of all the different developments that you see out there.
So interesting, Conny, and just sounds super intentional, and all those pillars make a lot of sense. For those sort of looking at a marketing career and a marketing future, I just wanted to ask your thoughts around the parts of your job which you enjoy the most. So if you're looking, you obviously have a lot of students on the call, and just reflecting on a marketing career and the various components of it. I just wondered if you could reflect on which parts of it you find yourself in the most flow, which parts you enjoy the most.
Well, what I like the most, and it will not be a surprise after you've asked me a bit on what is driving me, is the enormous pace of development, and that digital is actually really transforming the consumer goods industry and marketing with it. So that's what I like most. But why is that so relevant for marketing? Because also consumers' lives are changing at a rapid speed, and that comes with enormous opportunities, but also with quite some responsibilities. Our engagement with the Facebooks and the TikToks, and making sure that these platforms are to be trusted, that they conform to what we feel is really needed to keep the trust in advertising high, to make sure that there's age gating, that can be audited as well. I think that is an offense and a defense side of marketing that I really, truly, truly love. And what I find fascinating is that due to digital and technology, there's so many new ways of knowing how the consumer shops, lives, and consumes, what's on his mind. How do we make sure that we tap into it? Because let's not forget, the innovative part of marketing is also found, of course, in the way we do marketing, but also in the innovations that we put on the market. So, and there's now so many new ways of innovating. Artificial intelligence is really helping us to, where before we were talking to consumers and everything was very sequential. Then you came up with a concept, you tested the concept, then you took a look at advertising, tested the advertising. And now all of this can actually be done in a matter of days in trying to find out what are the ingredients that are trending at this moment in time. What is it that is being bought very often? What are still the pain points with it? So I truly love this the convergence actually of what digital brings with the old-fashioned consumer centricity. And I think that is what I find really fascinating in marketing at this moment in time.
Sounds so interesting, Conny. And perhaps a question to build on that, with so many channels and media types and ways to reach audiences today, with that objective of building long-term brands, which are going to be around in the years to come, I just wondered if you had a view on where you feel the most impactful way to reach brands is today, with that objective of sort of long-term driving growth over the long term. With so many different options, I was just wondering if anything springs to mind as somewhere where you feel that there is a great environment for your brands to reach audiences.
I think every brand in itself has a specific job to be done. Now, what I do feel, because Unilever is known to be a developing and emerging markets multinational, is where brands play a critical role in these markets is to develop these categories, to develop the markets, to make sure that there's activities being put on the market that attract people to start using specific categories. And I think that is a way to build brands, because you take actually as a brand, as a token of trust, you take people by the hand into categories that they probably are not so familiar with yet. So I think that is a critical one. And the other one won't come as a surprise. I think we've entered the era where people really want to make sustainable choices. They want to make personal sustainable choices. And that's well, if there is a positive side to COVID, I know that's hard because we've all gone through lots of hardship. But one of the things is really that consciousness has increased. And whilst before, lots of consumers or people were thinking that actually what I do doesn't really matter too much, I'm just a little drop in the ocean. Now people have really experienced that it is the power of many. We all need to take the same measures to prevent us from getting into lockdowns again and COVID to rule the world. And that's actually also a bit with the planet and with polarization. Social inequality and climate change are the two most devastating forces actually at this moment in time. If we make sure that brands play a role in that arena, and we take people by the hand and showing them that actually small changes in their lives, by making a choice for a more sustainable product than the other product that you were trying to buy, a more sustainable brand, I think is also one of the key things that brands can do. Brands as basically what we now tend to say is brands are not only a good value proposition anymore, so the right superior product against the right price, but it's also standing for value. So the dual nature of value comes out, because people want to see what brands stand for in values, and if that adheres to the values that they live themselves. And I think making sustainability less complex, actually simple, and preferred for consumers is also something that for the coming years and years will be extremely important for us to embark upon.
That makes so much sense, Conny. I've personally been exposed to the Future 50 campaign, which looks to tell the world about the foods which you should eat more of, which are good for you and good for the planet. And that's the one campaign I've seen quite a lot of, and it definitely has shifted behavior. You know, I think about what we buy, and a lot of that food in that list of 50 is not stuff you would naturally go out and find. But once you do engage with the story, it makes a lot of sense. And so that's one which has worked for me personally. And I was wondering if you have any examples of where your purpose and sustainability strategy with specific brands has yielded really great positive results which have excited you personally.
There's many, with so many brands in the portfolio, Jon, it's difficult to choose. But immediately when you were talking about Knorr and the Future 50, I was thinking firstly of Hellmann's, make taste, not waste. I think that is perfect, because what do you use mayonnaise for, the whole category? Well, you can turn any leftover into something that is truly delicious. And I think we've entered an era where food waste, we all know that most of the food waste is actually done by consumers. It's not so much in factories anymore or in raw materials, because that has all been optimized. But consumers throw away a lot of food. And if you use mayonnaise to make something really delicious of it, and that's why I truly believe that making taste, not waste, is so perfectly suited for Hellmann's. But our best known example is obviously, probably Lifebuoy and Dove. So on Dove, you've always known, I think many people on this call will know that Dove stands for real beauty, and that we want to portray women in all sizes, curves, and really make sure that we build self-confidence. And that is often inflicted by social media and by portrayal of women in ways that especially girls want to live up to. And we've had many campaigns, and I hope that you've seen sketches, which is something how women see themselves and actually how others see them. And now recently we've come up with partnerships with gaming, and because gaming has become big for boys and for girls, obviously. And actually, if you take a look at games, and hopefully many of you play them as well, the way women are portrayed is really not up to standards. So we need to make sure that there is a normal portrayal of women also in gaming. So DAF has really embarked on this journey to now be working together with the many games that we all play and really make sure that women are portrayed, that you can choose the women that you see around you instead of all women that have all the curves that somehow, some way, it has came into a stereotype. So we try to unstereotype gaming now with DAF, which I think is the next frontier. So I really love that. But also with Lifebuoy, I think in Lifebuoy you've got such a fantastic brand in the hygiene space. And obviously during COVID times, it had a special dimension to it. But the way that we can make sure that children reach the age of 5 when they're out of the really a dangerous zone in some of the emerging markets, and making sure that that we go out, have education programs where we show young children that just washing your hands with water is not sufficient to kill germs, so that we really need to have hand washing campaigns all across. I think is another beautiful way of not only saying that you stand for hygiene, but also doing it. And that's what I just meant, Jon, when I said a brand needs to have a good brand say and a brand do. Now, in transparent times like these, it is truly of the most importance that you live your purpose, that it's not only about advertising. And of course people need to know about it, but you also need to be authentic in activating it, and doing matters. And often we're not the best ones, and we make loads of mistakes along the way as well, with a brand called Domestos. I don't know how many of you know it. It's a brand to clean toilets. I see a couple of people nodding, so it must be a famous brand. We thought that our aim was to build toilets across the world, because we're a toilet cleaner. And actually, we're not the best ones to build toilets. There's much better organizations that build toilets. But what we are good at is keeping those toilets clean and making sure that people can continue to use them. So we've changed our brand do, and we said, we're not going to build toilets anymore. There's much better place to do so. But what we can do is make sure that these toilets are always accessible for people, because they're cleaned with Domestos or whatever the brand name is in specific countries. So we're learning along the way. By far, we haven't tackled all of it. It is still a journey out there, but these are just a couple of examples where I truly believe that brands are standing for something that matters, that is easier for consumers to hop on that wagon and to make a small change themselves for a better planet and a better society.
It's amazing with an internal strategic shift that you can go from perhaps spending money on a billboard to potentially saving lives of children under the age of 5. I mean, it's such a remarkable shift, and it feels like such a good shift for the world. So one last question before I take some of the questions from the audience is just, as you know, we have lots of students who are considering being on this call means they're probably considering or are in marketing careers. But a question for those who are considering embarking on a marketing future, just any advice you might have about where to start. And then a build on that question is just, if you were starting tomorrow, where you think you would start?
Well, first of all, there's never a recipe. So that's what I wanted to say, because people often look like, oh, you've become the Chief Digital Marketing Officer. How have you done it? And let me replicate. It is your own journey, and enjoy it. Make sure that you do the things that you learn a lot from. It will not be enjoyment every day. That is also ridiculous to say, because learning is hard at times, as you'll know, and it comes from failures as well. But what I would say is make sure you build a broad range. Now that the marketing profession is quite broad, it is coming together with sales. Due to e-com, the split between marketing and sales is less clear. Because whenever you drive your sales in an e-com channel, You could say, I'm in sales, but you could also say, no, I'm doing it because I do performance marketing, I advertise on that channel. So you see a real convergence. So make sure that within marketing, in your first years, in whatever company, you get to see the real brand crafting, thinking about brand purposes, real brand engagement. How do you build it with consumers? That you do a couple of really good innovation projects. So become a real good project manager on innovation. Make sure you do some go-to-market marketing jobs. Make sure you add to it some digital work, whether you work in a digital hub or you work on a couple of platforms. Make sure you add on to that some sales experiences, whether it is with traditional customers like the Tesco's and the Sainsbury's, or whether it is with the Amazons or the Bol.coms or the Tesco.coms. I think all of that helps you to build a really good picture. And then if you get to it, make sure that you also spend some time in the sustainability space if you're really into wanting to make the world a better place. And nowadays, the beauty is that you don't need to do roles for an endless period of time. At least in companies like Unilever, you get to do roles for 2-3 years, especially in the beginning of your career or when you're a trainee for 6 months, and make sure that these experiences are really different in different kind of markets. Even within Unilever, it is completely different if you work on the vegetarian butcher than if you work on one of our prestige brands or you work on Domestos, as I just called out. So I would say, especially in the beginning, make sure that you have a multitude of experiences, because from it, you learn what you really like and probably what you don't like so much, but to hold on, because there will be a better moment coming up, and it makes you realize what is important for you and what you're really good at when you thrive and what you really want to accomplish. So a broad range, that's the only thing I can say. Learn from your leaders. There's some you will love and there will some you will hate, but also from one that you don't like to work with, there's lots to learn, because you really want to make sure you don't replicate it whenever you become the leader. So I think all of this is needed in the end to find your edge. What is it that you're particularly good at, what you truly enjoy, and how you can move the industry on to I think to become leading edge. So that's what I would want to give you. And if I were to start again, there's not so many things I regret in life, to be honest. And if I regret it, I still have another 50 years to make up for it, isn't it? So it's all fine. But I have truly loved all the experiences I have had. And as long as I every day felt like I came from work with more energy than when I came into the office and I started the day, I think you're doing something that challenges you, that provokes you, that brings out the best of you. And then having people around you that give you honest feedback and on a frequent basis makes that you also have really good opportunities to develop. And whether that feedback is from your kids at home or your partner, or whether it is from your colleagues, I think both is very, very valuable. So, and with that, you learn all the time. So, and that's what I'm truly grateful for and intended to continue for the coming 50 to 70 years, I was thinking, Jon.
Sounds amazing. Thank you, Conny. And that was such a great answer. I think, Ashita, we need to save that one in the LBS archives of student advice. I'm going to turn to some of the questions from the audience, and thanks everyone who submitted them. The first one is, with all the change happening today, does traditional marketing still have a place in this changing landscape? And how do you make sure that you're moving fast enough into what's new?
Well, I think, how do you make sure that, because yes, the answer to the first part is yes, it still has a role to play. Of course, not in the traditional way, but we will need to move on all the time. And how do you make sure that you stay aligned and in touch with everything that's happening at this moment in time? I think one of the critical things is that we also, in these bigger multinationals, now work very much in an agile way. And I know it's a bit of a buzzword for everyone, but what it really means is that there is a huge room to try out things, learn, pivot, do it again, be very vocal about the risks that you see and where you feel that you need help, have an enormous pace. And that is what I really like about the agile way of working. Be clear on what your outcome KPIs are, or your OKRs. And then work towards this, have autonomous teams being put together for a specific task, and let them come to their sponsor board or the investor board or whatever you call it, or the share pass. There's nice terminology in this world, obviously, to get help if they need it, and otherwise get on with the job. Now that's also a bit how we learn, also with these with the platforms. And at times there's also reasons to say we have waited quite a bit to be working with TikTok, for instance. And of course, everybody has seen that TikTok is having a massive rise in attracting more and more people. But we just felt that we didn't want our brands to be in an environment that was poorly regulated and where age gating, which was our main concern, was not really happening. Now, and then working together with these platforms and say, the only way in which we're going to embark on this journey is to make sure that you put this in place and it can be audited, because otherwise we are not wanting to engage. Now, does it mean that we don't do anything? Of course not, because you want to pilot as well. So yes, we wanted to pilot a couple of things that we have done in specific areas, because sometimes there are specific countries who are better regulated than others. But all in all, there isn't a magic recipe other than having young people in your organization who challenge you on a daily basis, who tell you that you've become old-fashioned, that they know a lot better, which is honestly true, and they get on with the job and just try it out and show us how it's fascinating. And yesterday I was talking to one of our trainees, and he's not a trainee anymore. He started 5 years ago. And Maurice had the idea of, if people would be sitting on the couch watching Netflix, they would want a Ben & Jerry's, isn't it? But how do you get a Ben & Jerry's? Seems like an old-fashioned problem now, because you can order it via Getir or Gorillas or whatever. But you know what? 5 years ago, there was quite a big insight, and we started putting some cabinets with the pizza restaurants, etc. So whenever you ordered your pizza, you could also order a Ben & Jerry's or a Magnum. And it has grown into a business now around the world of 500 million, soon to become a billion business. Same brands, same appeal for people, different moments, and making use of the fast delivery business models that are out there now. So I would say I try to listen as much as possible to young people with new innovative thoughts, and by introducing Agile, they have a much better chance of bubbling up throughout the organization.
Thanks so much, Conny. The next question from Lorene in South Africa. So Conny, how do you balance and drive digital transformation agendas in Africa and emerging markets? And I guess it's such a challenge where it's so different to the developed markets. Just if you have any thoughts on that.
I always think, Jon, in digitization, the split between developed and developing is not really working, because actually I had the luxury of living in Singapore from 2011 to 2016, and China was my biggest market. And I came back to the Netherlands, and they said, "Oh, can you tell a bit about what you found out in the D&E world?" Thinking that we would be in the developed world 5 years ahead. It's exactly the opposite. So the Asia is 5 years ahead of us. So they had WeChat before we could even pronounce it, and they had way more digital opportunities than we had, and they saw the possibilities of it in a much faster developed ecosystem than we actually did. So I think there's loads of things to learn from whatever is happening in that space. And if you take a look, a small thing to say, but the percentage of media we spend on digital across the world is around 55%. Now, if you take a look in China, it is 85-90%. If you take a look in Africa, because I heard the question was specifically also from Africa, it might be slightly lower, but never forget that in the developing world, people skip phases. So everybody has a mobile nowadays. And that's the way that we use microcredit now in Africa quite a bit. There's ways to advertise by giving people credit. In India, for instance, one of the best ways in which we make sure that people know our brands, if they've got a smartphone, is working together with the telephone operating companies and see how you can advertise using a mobile phone. So I think for many, well, for less and less so, but for some of the ways of looking at the world, D and E is still a good way to look at it, because there's lots of market development. I'm fascinated by the middle income group that China has managed to get people out of poverty, and now getting really into the economy and the huge opportunities it provides, and also the societal plus this has created. But then again, I think in the digital front, we needed to split the world differently, and there's huge opportunities actually everywhere.
Thanks, Conny. I realize we only have 2 minutes of your time left, so I'm going to ask one last question. And the last question is simply, what inspired you to pursue a career in marketing?
Do you really want to know, John? So, to be honest, I studied healthcare administration. So I studied healthcare administration, and I thought, oh, one day I'll run a hospital. And then I started working in the healthcare industry, and I realized, gosh, it will take me 50 years before I'm capable of running a hospital, because this is quite a bureaucratic world and it takes forever. And how do I work with governments in all of this? And then I thought, you know what, let me do an MBA and see what the profit world is like, because I actually didn't have a clue. I didn't have a clue about marketing, because in the Netherlands, hospitals are not allowed to market themselves. And I did an MBA, and I was sent to Kellogg Graduate School of Management, discovered marketing. I thought, oh, this is really nice to be doing something with instant gratification, putting new products on the market, influencing many instead of a few. And one day I'll run my hospital, but let me get a bit of experience in this for-profit world. That one day will come, John, for certain. But I think what really inspired me is to see how you can make an impact on so many people if you do the right things. Because in Unilever, on a daily basis, 2.5 billion people are in contact with our products. Now, that is the masses. So your impact is ridiculous if you think about it, if you do things well. And I think that's also been one of the things that some of the trainees or young people that joined Unilever, that first joined smaller startups that were really in the sustainability area active. The only reason to join is that the impact of a multinational is so much bigger. So if you do something well, you really have the power of many behind you. And I think that's kept me going for all those years, John.
Conny, thank you so much. That was so interesting. I feel like I've learned so much about you and Unilever and your objectives over the last hour. And thank you so much for taking the time. I think we're also honored that you have taken the time to share with us. Absolutely fascinated by your views on purpose and your views on sustainability, and just how intentional you are around how you're focusing and what you're focusing on as a marketing team. Just such interesting stuff there. And thank you so much for taking the time. For anyone on the call, I follow Conny on LinkedIn, and great place to follow to see more about all of what you're talking about now. Conny, thank you so much for your time, and really appreciate it, and have a great day.
Thank you so much, and wishing you all a great day and a lovely career, because that's what we were here for.